Hello, 7th grade. Today we are talking about using value, which is different lights to darks that you can create in an artwork. So for your first project this semester, we will be using value in order to create a drawing that is realistic with both value and texture. So before we start on that, we want to learn about some different value techniques, be able to practice those, and also achieve a full range of value, which means that you have different lights and darks, because that is what is going to help make an artwork look realistic. So all you need today is this worksheet and a pencil and eraser. So at the top over here, you can see it says value techniques. We have 4 boxes underneath it. Each of them are labeled. So here we are just going to put an example of each value technique into the box. So shading. Shading is what you probably think of when you think of value, where it has a smooth transition from dark to light. You might have also heard it called blending. So a good example for shading is to have a small area that gradually changes from dark until a middle gray tone and gradually until light. And you simply do that by gradually changing the pressure of your pencil. All right, so the second value technique is called hatching. And hatching uses a series of lines going in one direction. When the lines are closer together, they create a darker value, and when the lines are lighter, but also further apart, that creates a lighter value as well. So for hatching, again, this is lines going in just one direction. So I'm gonna go up and down, some darker lines close together, and gradually pull them a little bit further apart. All right, so cross hatching. You can probably imagine if hatching is lines going in one direction, cross hatching is going to be lines going in 2 directions. They are crossing over each other. Otherwise, the same principle applies. When the lines are closer together or crossing over each other more, that value will be darker. And when the lines are further apart or crossing over less, they will be lighter. You probably see hatching and cross hatching more in certain varieties of like comics and that kind of thing. It is used a lot there. All right, so for cross hatching again, you want to, I'm going to start with the same thing I did for hatching, but then I'm also going to cross over. All right, and it can go in a 3rd direction as well. That's totally fine. I'm going to stick with those 2. All right, so stippling. Stippling has the same basic principle as hatching and cross hatching. When items are closer together, they're darker, further apart, they're lighter, except stippling is going to use a series of dots. Now, as you can probably imagine, stippling is time consuming. It does look really cool when it's done. I'm not expecting any of you to complete an entire project using stippling. That would not be reasonable of me. However, it can be a really excellent resource for adding texture, which is why we are learning about that. So for stippling, I'm just going to put some dots. There is no need to create an incredibly loud noise when you're doing this. And then again, they gradually pull apart to become lighter. This is something that works excellent with pen and ink drawings, probably just because the pen will release those dots a little bit more easily. All right, so we're going to now practice creating 2 different value scales. So a value scale is when you have a series of values going from darkest to lightest, and they do so gradually. So we're going to create a value scale first using shading. So you can see under the first box, it says darkest, which means you are going to fill in this box with your darkest possible value. I'll make that neater in a second. All right, and then over here on the right, it says lightest. And over here, you want to achieve your lightest possible value. Do not leave this the white of the paper. You are creating the lightest gray that you possibly can. Okay, so I want you to notice something. Shading, there are no lines in between your pencil strokes. They're nice and tight together. They appear solid. So there is no reason to see any lines here. That's what hatching and cross hatching are for. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in the rest of my value scale. All right, so for a value scale, you should see distinct, separate values. They should all look different from each other. So once you practice with shading, you are going to go to the second value scale and you are going to choose either hatching, cross-hatching, or stippling in order to create a second value scale. So I'm going to go ahead and use cross-hatching, but you can pick any of these other three in order to create a second value scale for practice. All right, so after you finish with your second value scale, we're going to turn to the bottom. And it says, turn a circle into a sphere using shading. So what shading does is it takes something flat, something two-dimensional, and it creates the illusion of something three-dimensional, or a form, something that takes up space. Let's look at an example of that really quick. All right, so with this print off right here, you can see obviously this shape is a circle, but somebody, and it was not me, somebody shaded this circle in order to appear like a sphere. So this drawing right here has all of these different values in it. This has 10 different values. I'm asking you to work to achieve 6 different values in your drawings. So let's notice a couple things. With this sphere, you can imagine that the light is coming in from this direction. That's what creates the highlight right here. From the highlight, it gradually becomes a little bit darker until you reach the shadow. There is also a cast shadow, probably the darkest part of the sphere, that is extending onto the table. So what your job is with this right here is basically to create a small version of that image that I just showed you. So the image is posted so that way you can take a look at it and use it as an example. I would again imagine that the light is coming from this direction so that you have a highlight. It gradually becomes a little bit darker, and I would include a cast shadow as well. My advice, make sure that you are shading in a somewhat rounded way in order to stick with the shape of the circle.